Hello mortals, I am the goddess who created the text world of Listernia, and I wanted to spotlight a very special autobiography for Pride Month. The Naked Civil Servant by Quentin Crisp, published in 1968. If you don't know who Quentin Crisp is, pause this video and Google him. He was a fascinating person, someone who was outrageously, fabulously, unapologetically a feminine gay man, which was way back during World War II. His autobiography covers his life as an artist, a male prostitute, and a nude model. When he was a nude model, he worked in art colleges, and his salary was paid by the government. Thus, the title of the book, The Naked Civil Servant. Literally a naked government employee. Quentin Crisp's entire life was a performance art. He's just such a fascinating person and was really big in the 80s and late 70s. He was on a lot of talk shows. David Letterman loved him.
In the book Naked Civil Servant, in a time when it wasn't popular to do so, you lived openly as a homosexual in London. And of course, I would guess a question you must be tired of is, why subject yourself? What year is this? The mid-40s?
In the mid-30s.
Mid-30s. So why subject yourself to this abuse? And it certainly was abuse, wasn't it?
Oh, it was indeed, but I never really had any alternative. I didn't come out. I was never in. I could never have disguised myself as a human being.
Especially after his book was made into a fantastic movie of the same name in 1975, starring John Hurt. There was a sequel to the movie made in 2009, John Hurt reprising the role based on Quentin Crisp's later life, entitled Englishman in New York. And the title of that movie is from the song by Sting, who wrote that song about Quentin Crisp. I'll link Sting's music video below, which includes an appearance or appearances by Quentin Crisp. So let's get back to his first book, The Naked Civil Servant. We normally read autobiographies for the stories and anecdotes, not so much for the writing itself. Like I reviewed George Takei's autobiography, To the Stars, which I'll link somewhere, and the writing was fine, but nothing special. A few autobiographers surprise you with good writing, like Shirley MacLaine actually seemed to embrace the craft of writing, incorporating plot and character development in story arcs. But few autobiographies are written where the writing itself is so memorable and quotable, and that is what you get with Quentin Crisp. Let me just read the opening in the first chapter. From the dawn of my history, I was so disfigured by the characteristics of a certain kind of homosexual person that, when I grew up, I realized that I could not ignore my predicament. The way in which I chose to deal with it would now be called existentialist. Perhaps Jean-Paul Sartre would be kind enough to say that I exercised the last vestiges of my free will by swimming with the tide, but faster. In the time of which I am writing, I was merely thought of as brazening it out. I became not merely a self-confessed homosexual, but a self-evident one. That is to say, I put my case not only before the people who knew me, but also before strangers. This was not difficult to do. I wore makeup at a time when even on women eyeshadow was sinful. Many a young girl in those days had to leave home and go on the streets simply in order to wear nail varnish. The writing itself is what we can describe as arch. There's a humorous, wry take on everything he observes. Even the most tragic memories of writing is almost aggressively witty. It's a self-defense mechanism, sure, but it's so fascinating, so clever, and sometimes so profound that Crisp can evoke his personality, his pathos, his intellect into prose, and you don't know whether to laugh or cry. He basically recounts his life as being an extremely out and flamboyant gay man. It is slightly frustrating how passive he can be, how accepting he comes across, that he'll be so downtrodden and happiness was somehow for other people. You get the sense that life just happened to him and he never protested. But when you really think about the time in which he lived, he is extraordinarily brave for living as such an extremely feminine man. And the way he finds humor, despite all the crap that life has thrown at him, is nothing short of inspirational. This is not a happy book, but it is a funny book, and I love it. Even if you don't pick up this book, I encourage you to search YouTube for clips of Quentin Crisp when he performed one-man shows and answered questions from the audience. And that way you can see what a magical creature this man was.
Nearly all of my patients come to therapy with the same complaint. I feel worthless and unlovable. I don't like myself, and I don't see how anyone else can. What would your suggestions be to these patients were you a therapist? Well, of course, they're absolutely right. But they confuse the two things. You don't have to be lovable to other people. You only have to learn to accept. Your very own Danny Kaye said, you cannot love the world until you've at least settled for yourself. And that's what you have to do. You have to push your neuroses around until they're in a place where they don't hurt. You don't need the love of others. You only need to feel that you have made the most of yourself, that what little you can do and say and be, you have done and said and been. That's all there is. And if you can get your patients to see that I would say that was the answer.
I give The Naked Civil Servant 5 stars and it gets my blessing. Thumbs up if you like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. And may all the books you read be blessed.